Okay, so now you should be at your T chart. We're doing part two of this extension activity for oligarchy. First thing, we're going to look at Khrushchev and we're going to look at his rise to power. He ruled from 1953 to 1964, that was 11 years. He was born in the Ukraine. He was the poor son of a coal miner. So, similar to Stalin, he had a very poor upbringing. He began working in factories and as a pipe fitter as early as 15 years old, and also became an active member of the Bolshevik Party. He's similar in age to Stalin, if that helps you understand a little bit about the context. He received a secondary education and gained a position as a local official in the Ukraine. He distinguished himself as knowledgeable and a hard worker and started moving up in positions, government positions within the Communist Party. He was noticed by Stalin's Central Committee. It's called the Politburo. And this was the sort of, you know, these were the main people that were really advisors to Stalin and were responsible for a lot of the administration and legislation within the Communist Party. Initially, he was an avid supporter of Stalin and the Great Purge in the 1930s, very much a believer in communism and the revolution. He became a full member of the Politburo in 1939. He gained power and voice among Stalin's top advisors, so he moved up in rank and was actually part of that central committee. He represented Ukraine through World War II and the Great Famine, but he started to become frustrated with a lot of Stalin's policies, saw a lot of the problems with them, and was not and started to get frustrated with that stuff. So he used his political skill to gain power as a central leader of the Communist Party after Stalin's death in 1953. What are some of the things he did? So this is a great opportunity to write some notes here in your T chart. He denounced the excesses of the Stalin era and acknowledged the atrocities committed by Stalin. And this stunned the leadership at the time. It stunned the West that this was publicly broadcast. It stunned the public throughout the Soviet Union, and so he initially decentralized authority by encouraging voice among the political leaders. He started to get the Politburo to, they had more of a voice than they did under Stalin. And he began the process of doing many of the policies that were under Stalin. This became known as de-Stalinization. He started to be known throughout the population for his humanistic ideas. He relaxed restrictions on freedom of expression, so he allowed more freedom of expression. He relaxed restrictions that were censoring things, so allowed more more things to be put out there. He released waves of political prisoners from the gulags and other places. He reduced the secret police, which was very much an overarching force throughout the Stalin era. He provided more open borders for travel between the East and West. He increased agricultural production and did a lot for having more consumer goods and trying to raise the living standards of the general population. He also promoted space exploration, Sputnik. He, the first man in space, the first rocket to the moon. So really big things during the space race. A lot can be attributed to Khrushchev and him encouraging his policies. But just like I said, with any leader, there's controversial aspects. So while he was a fervent believer in communism, he saw a policy of peaceful coexistence with the West. So he really did try to make, on one hand, make things seem better between the East and West, something Stalin wasn't really into. However, the relationship was complicated and contradictory. Not only did he engage with the West more, he even visited the U.S., something Stalin never did. But during his reign, the Cold War reached its highest points. Spy planes were shot down over the Soviet Union. That were flying, U.S. spy planes that were flying over the Soviet Union. He was part of constructing the Berlin Wall to keep people from flooding from east to west in Europe, and he also the Cuban Missile Crisis happened during his administration. Similarly, his social reforms at once liberated and repressed his people. So on one hand, an oppositional movement within the Soviet Union started to develop because of his policies of freedom of expression and reduced censorship. Rebellions in both Hungary and Poland emerged. Poland's rebellion ended peacefully, but Hungary's did not, and he sent troops in, and 2,500 civilians were actually killed to quell or to stop the rebellion. So on one hand, he's providing freedom. On the other, he's trying to stop it in order to keep power. He relaxed production on military goods and increased production on consumer goods, as we noted, but he cut back on that as more energy and more of the wealth was focused on competing with the U.S. So some interesting things to think about when we think about Khrushchev. So now, your goal is to complete these 3 questions. Was Stalin more of an autocrat or an oligarch? Use evidence to explain your answer. So why was he one or the other? Use terms that we've learned. Same with Khrushchev. Was he more of an autocrat or an oligarch when we look at the Soviet Union? Why? Use evidence to explain your answer. And I know you only have a limited view of the Soviet Union, but based on what you've learned and what you're thinking about, what aspects do you think maybe fit the mold of an oligarchy? Look back through the definition, look back through the terms to think about that when we look at the Soviet Union. And you're welcome to do additional research too, but at least this gives you some idea of how things worked in this contemporary government. All right. Look forward to hearing your responses.